High probability is a term that varies with the individual that you're talking with. High probability to one person can be when 50% of the time something happens. To others, it might be 70 or 80% of the time. In the DTVB system, we have high probabilities that are beyond normal. And once you understand how the system works, it makes sense. But it doesn't make sense when you first look at it. The best way to understand it is to, first of all, understand that the system has three very commanding powers. The indicator power, which is the sensitive indicators that make up the patterns and the conditions and the signals that we identify. They also do it with great speed, I guess is the term, with great quickness, because they identify the change. And so we get into a position, or can get into a position much sooner than others can, because we identify those tiny market forces or those pressures that are changing. The formula is that the system has is the patterns. We have over 20 pattern types up and 20 pattern types down. And those patterns help us identify direction, first of all, but they give us great high probability trades. And the signals are in some way or another, depending on the pattern that you're looking at, they identify the point that you enter or exit a trade. And those signals are as much important as in other parts of the system. Probably the greatest reason the system is so effective is just the combination of everything within it. The sensitive indicators, the formula that you have to find the high probability trades, and the procedures power. And that procedures power is basically when you analyze, you just make a comparison between two opportunities. And you look at the 7 short-term trend lines, and you look at other indicator lines, and you identify where the price lines are and what the separation is between the green and red versus the price blue, where trend red is in relation to power red. If you took 10 symbols or 10 stocks that you picked up off of a scan that you had, and they happened to be, you set a scan for a certain pattern, and all of those patterns spit themselves out. You didn't put any conditions in it. It was just a generic pattern. That pattern, in that pattern, for example, and I've used this before, you could have 2 out of the 10 react as anticipated, and we'll assume a nice big green candle on both of them. 5 or 6 of them could be small green candles or medium-sized green candles, and 2 or 3 could be red candles. We say that the conditions were either bad, poor, or good. The market forces, you can say, were bad, poor, or good for that particular pattern. And so the issue becomes the identification, the reversal recognition identification is the term that we use to establish a basic premise behind why day trading visual basics exists. That was the emphasis on locating cycle tops and cycle bottoms, finding reversal patterns, seeing when stocks gapped up or gapped down. Those are all changes in a cycle. And then we also realized that the cycle change, or at the point that the cycle changed, there was identification. There were ways to identify how strong that movement was going to be. In other words, you may have an uptrend with 3 to 5 green candles, or you may have a gap. Obviously, not a gap, because the gap with gaps, the short-term trend lines are typically going to be down, and things are going to be in some type of divergence, or it's going to go up based on something different than, for example, a BOC turnaround, a bottom of cycle turnaround, which is a deep V, which is a V pattern with right leg going, with a left leg going down and a right leg going up. And now those cycle turnarounds, the typical one that we think of is that BOC pattern. That pattern can be weak, it can be strong. What we learned is that we can identify the strength through indicator line length. So in other words, the left leg of the left line of a BOC pattern is shorter than the right line as it's going back up, and that's referred to as a BOC higher pattern, versus one that's under or shorter than the left leg would be a BOC lower pattern. Lower patterns don't have the strength that BOC higher patterns do, and it varies significantly as to which indicators have those BOC higher patterns, because not all indicators are the same. The big three are very important: trend red, power red, and swing Zion. The 5 price barometers are very important. Again, swing Zion, zip pink, and the 3 price lines, green, red, and blue. Leading indicators are very important. Swing pink and zip red are the 2 quickest lines in the entire system. When swing pink and swing Zion are in divergence, you have a leading indicator in divergence with a price barometer. That's very significant. We watch that pair a lot. The biggest indicator that we watch is trend red. It gives us more information than any other indicator in the system. And when you have divergence, my favorite pair of divergence indicators are trend red and power red. And you can have those in one line differences, one up, one down. You can have them in right leg W patterns or BOC. One's a BOC higher, one's a BOC lower. There are many patterns of types of divergence, and there obviously is directional divergence. And there's there's dozens and dozens and dozens of types of divergence that you can identify with through different patterns and types. I think of large divergence, where you might have something that's divergent for 5 or 6 or 8 days. Anyway, I digress. The issue is you had those 10 indicators or 10 opportunities that you examined, 2 of them there were good. Generically, that's how they came out of the system. That's how they appeared. That specific pattern has a 2 out of 10 or a 20% ratio, or what we refer to as a 20% high probability ratio, which is not high. However, when we analyze the two symbols or stocks that had nice green candles, certain conditions became quite visible in what they had and what others did not have. And I might add that as a result of the sensitive indicators, because the sensitive indicators are the heart of the system. Without those indicators, keep in mind we built 12 to 1400 indicators starting in 2007. We're now 10 years later, and this system is going active now. For about 3 years ago, we decided that it would be good to share this, and so slowly we put the thing together and made it ready. The system works. The system works very effectively, but the process, the identification of the creation of those sensitive indicators, put together with the formula of the patterns and the conditions and the signals, give us the high probability ratios. Every single trade we make is high probability. If you take a red peak or a red spike, in a red spike you have zip red above 50 going up and zip yellow under 50 going down. And the reciprocal situation is with a red spike. And so but the thing that we noticed with red peaks and red spikes is that they have tremendous flexibility. We typically now think of a red spike as red can be down under 50 and yellow can be down under 30 or around 30. I mean, we continue to see it when red is at 0 and yellow is down, at 10 or 15. Not always, but there's great flexibility in the red peak and the red spike. That's not necessarily the case with other indicators. But that high probability, like red peaks and red spikes, just generically when they appear, they have a much higher high probability ratio, like maybe 70 or 80%. And then when we establish some criteria, with supporting evidence, like when the 7 short-term trend lines are all going up and you have a red spike, you typically get a really nice green candle. And so there's supporting evidence issues with each of those examples that we see. And that becomes part of the conditions that we verify for the different choices that we have. And so with all of that said, I now can tell you that the high probability of these indicators is way above 90, most of the time above 95%. And that's going to sound absolutely crazy, but it's not. And the reason it's not is because we've analyzed the conditions that are effective for the specific pattern. Obviously, when you have like a red peak, your lines are going up and their red is high. In the reciprocal situation, you have red real low, down at 10 or maybe 5, and the length of the line length when the red peak and red spike occur does make a difference. If you've got a spike down in zip red, like 40, 50 or more points. That's real significant in adding to the supporting evidence that would verify it's going to go back up the next day. When you get low angles, it can be true, usually is, but the day before might have only been a red, zip red line length of 20 or something lower, and so it didn't dictate a reversal. Also, zip yellow, when it's high, it doesn't have to be going down in a red spike. It can be going up. Just the fact that it's up high, like above 75 or so, is the reason that it reverts back or reversals back up. Now, this is why high probability is a factor in what we do. The system was built on reversal recognition identification. That premise was there. We wanted to have a system that we could identify the strength of a market movement and identify it at the turnaround. Obviously, gaps are a recognizable way to identify a strong turnaround, but when you've seen the gap, it's too late. And so when you have a low angle down, like in trend red, that is a reversal sign. Even though we've still got a red candle, it's a turnaround signal. And those low angle up and low angle down signals, especially in the big three, the trend red, power red, and swing Zion, those are very effective. And again, normally they're all lowest, or on the peak, they're all three highest. It is absolutely an amazing system. The high probability is way beyond normal, and we're grateful for it. But the package is what creates it. It's the heart of the indicators are the heart of the system. The formula in the way we identified the 20 plus patterns in each direction, and the verification of the conditions within those patterns, and then using the signal to identify the point in time when you enter the position or exit the position. And you obviously go down to if you're looking at a daily chart, and you're going to do a trade the following day at the open, you're obviously going to do it off the 1 minute or the 2 minute chart, because then you can read the sensitive indicators and see where it changes. Because remember, the general candle theory if you're assuming a green candle, when a green candle opens, the vast majority of time it does, whether it's above, at, or under the previous close, it will open, go down, then come back up, and go past the open, create the green body of the candle, go up higher, then at some time it'll come back down and create the upper tail of the candle. And obviously you created the lower tail when it went down initially. And so at the open you can identify, hey, I've got a green tail, it's going to go down. Obviously sometimes you get flat bottom green candles or flat top red candles. But the point I'm trying to make is that generally, under what we call normal candle theory, a red candle goes down, goes up, creates the body, and comes back down. That happens a huge percentage of the time. Now, that results, or that expectation that you see at the open is what gives you the ability to through the sensitive indicators, pick the bottom and pick the top if you want. I mean, we do that often at the end of toward the end of the day. Sometimes you get a strong movement right in the middle of the day. It depends on what's happening in the situation. But high probability is by far a the status quo at day trading visual basics. I mean, it's the only way we trade. You pick a pattern, you verify conditions, and you select that signal. And then you do it again and again and again and again, and you're analyzing the indicator lines in relation to the price movement, and you recognize things. You'll have a lot more indicator recognition power if you look at 10 videos, and then talk to us again after you've looked at 50 or 75 videos. You pick up a huge amount of information. The more videos you can look at, the better. High probability. It's exciting. It's what just dominates day trading visual basics. It's through the indicators, it's through the formula, and it's through the procedure. Because your knowledge, your ability grows constantly as you analyze each new opportunity. And this was one of the mandating ideas or issues that I had back from the beginning. 10 years ago, I was so inconsistent in my trading, I was dumbfounded because, I was looking at things and I wasn't being successful, and I knew there was a secret. Or maybe not a secret. I knew there was a method to identify how and why it was doing what it was doing. And I needed to find that method. And we stumbled for many years trying to coordinate different aspects or different issues within the system. And finally things started to click, and as soon as we've discovered, 5 or 6 patterns, then all of a sudden we had 10 and 15, and I think we ended up with 23 in each group. And so high probability, absolutely. That's what we thrive on. And it's beyond normal. It's way beyond normal. But it is because of our ability to select those conditions ideal for, and let's face it, each situation is a little different because the market pressures are a little different. And there's going to be some general ideas of each pattern and with those conditions that you see, and some are going to be stronger or weaker than others. And every time you're searching for, if in fact you're searching for a gap and you use the 3 patterns, the identical indicators, the downtrends in the trend chart, and there's 6 of those, or you're using the location patterns and the shape patterns in the proximity group in the power chart, the power 4 being pink, blue, white, and yellow, and the power 5 being Zion, and key divergent conditions in the locations of those indicators in its relation up or under power orange. Those are all factors to finding gaps, but you can find all of that, and you may not have enough supporting evidence, or maybe less supporting evidence than you see. And when I say supporting evidence, in that whole pattern, you might also have a Zip Zion lowest, which means, if you're not familiar with it, Zip Zion tracks trades in the market. It's the grandfather to Zip Green, and both of them track buyers. I like to say it track buyers, but it's actually or technically tracking the number of trades in and out of the market. When those two are at 0, there's a lot of people leaving, and when it's at 100, there's a lot of people going in. And so we use all of that evidence. If Zip Zion is lowest and it's going up, that's a pattern that is a supporting evidence to the other 3 pattern gap indicators that you have, the identical indicators, the down touch, and the proximity group. And so that extra supporting evidence gives you expectations of a gap. But with all of that information there, you can, this is going to be a gap. and it ends up being a 4-day green candle uptrend. Now, that's not bad. Don't misunderstand me. It's easy to make those mistakes. We've made them a lot. There's just things that you don't recognize in the beginning. You don't put things together. But you're not going to get hurt because you're dealing with what? You're dealing with pattern types up. And you're recognizing the direction that things are going to go. And so you end up with a small green candle. Day traders technically will get out before the end of the day. But swing traders will stay in, and you can sometimes capture gaps as well. And don't forget that when you see all of this movement, and then next day you get a dead candle. It's a doji, maybe it's just barely green, or even might be red the next day. Hang on. Because I call it a dead day or a dead spot, or I think of it as just a dead activity. But the following day is when it comes. And then you get a gap or a big green candle. So there are those stall days or dead days, however you look at them, right after you see what should potentially be a gap, or all of the indications are that you're going to have a nice price movement, either in a big green candle or a gap. So that's high probability how we see it at Day Trading Visual Basics.